Today, we honor 15 forgotten R&B souls whose stories still echo. While Motown and Stax crowned legends, many incredible artists slipped through history's fingers. Some faced heartbreak, exploitation, loss, and some simply vanished from the spotlight. Number 15, Howard Tate.
With each other, no wonder.
Howard Tate had one of those voices that felt like it came with the blues already baked into it. Born in Georgia and raised in Philadelphia, Tate signed with Verve in the mid-1960s, working closely with legendary producer Jerry Ragavoy.
Once upon a time, long time ago.
His sound wasn't sweet Motown pop. It was urban soul, tight, aching, and grown. Songs like Get It While You Can and Ain't Nobody Home turned heads among musicians and critics. Yet, mainstream recognition never fully landed.
Once upon a time, long time ago.
What makes Tate's story so tragic isn't just the lack of commercial breakthrough, it's what came after. As the spotlight faded in the 70s, Tate struggled deeply. Addiction pulled him down. His marriage collapsed. He lost contact with loved ones. For years, he drifted on the edge of society, completely unseen. His name nearly erased from the music he helped shape.
Wiped out the entire city. Well, Randy Newman wrote this song.
Then, in a twist almost too cinematic to believe, he resurfaced in the early 2000s, discovered singing in a New Jersey church. A stunning late career revival followed, complete with heartfelt performances that moved audiences to tears. But even that second chance was fragile. Tate's life ended in 2011 due to complications from cancer. Howard Tate's story is one of the great voices who lived a lifetime of soul before the world finally stopped to hear him. And if that one tugged at your heart, the next story is a talent lost far too soon. Number 14, Linda Jones.
Every smile is not a smile of happiness, and every tear that is shed is not a...
Linda Jones was often called the girl with the tear in her voice because every note she sang carried the weight of someone who had loved too hard, too early, and too deeply. Born in Newark, New Jersey, she came up singing gospel in storefront churches before stepping into R&B in the mid-1960s.
Rise on the tropic isle.
Her breakthrough arrived with Hypnotized in 1967, a record so emotionally charged it sounded like her heart was burning right there in the studio booth. But Linda struggled with a condition she rarely spoke about publicly: diabetes. And the touring life of a rising star in the 1960s was cruel to the body. Long nights, stress, irregular meals, and no one looking out for artists' health. She fainted often. Promoters sometimes thought she was just overdramatic or exhausted from performing. Few understood the seriousness. In 1972, at just 27 years old, Linda Jones slipped into a diabetic coma while resting between shows in Harlem. She never woke up, a once-in-a-generation voice, gone before most people even learned her name.
You belong to me.
Yet the feeling of Linda's music survived. To this day, when neo-soul vocalists stretch a note to the edge of heartbreak, Erykah Badu, Jasmine Sullivan, Ledisi, you can hear Linda's influence like a soft echo underneath. She didn't get the awards, the magazine covers, or the lifetime tributes. But she left something more intimate, a blueprint for singing from the soul's raw center. Her story reminds us how many artists gave everything to their music, while the world barely had time to receive them. And if Linda Jones was the voice of aching love, the next artist tragedy came from the shadow of a single unforgettable hit. Number 13, James Carr
In darkness to hide out wrong.
James Carr is one of the greatest soul singers most people have never truly heard. Born in Mississippi and raised in Memphis, he came up alongside the great Southern soul artists of the 1960s, recording for Goldwax Records.
We have to pay for the love we stole.
His masterpiece, The Dark End of the Street, 1967, remains one of the deepest, rawest confessions ever captured on tape. A lover's guilt turned into pure, aching poetry. When Carr sang, it didn't sound like performance. It sounded like confession. But James was battling something invisible, something far heavier than the industry knew how to handle. Severe mental illness.
Keeps coming on strong. Still.
Long before mental health care had language or compassion attached to it, Carr was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Touring became impossible. Sometimes he would freeze mid-performance, overwhelmed by the crowd and his own emotions. The industry, unsure and unprepared, simply stepped away.
They're gonna find us. They're gonna find.
As the fame faded, James drifted into long periods of silence and struggle. There were attempts at comebacks, moments where that incredible voice reemerged, trembling but still heavenly. But the support systems just weren't there. Carr passed away in 2001. His genius admired mostly by collectors, critics, and soul historians. Still, every time a singer lets vulnerability lead, when they break in the voice instead of hiding it.
At the dark end of the street.
When they let the hurt show, James Carr is there. He sang like a man who felt everything too deeply, and the world never learned how to hold him. If that story was heavy, stay close. Our next artist's tale is one of bright talent shadowed by a dark spiral. Number 12, Little Willie, Little Willie John.
Never know how much I care when you put your arm.
Was a fire starter. A voice small in size, but enormous in soul. Born in Arkansas and raised in Detroit, he came up young, very young, signing to King Records as a teenager. By the mid-1950s and into the early 60s, he was already shaping the emotional vocabulary of R&B with hits like Fever.
No one can love you the way I do, 'cause they don't know how.
Yes, the same song later made famous by Peggy Lee. But Willie's version wasn't cool and smoky. It was raw, hot, and hungry, like the band caught flame right in the studio. Yet fame came with pressure, and pressure found cracks. Willie was known for a temper that flared as fast as his talent.
Take this heart away. Take these.
The touring grind was grueling. Confrontations piled up. Alcohol didn't soothe, it sharpened. In 1965, after a nightclub altercation turned deadly, Willie was convicted of manslaughter and sent to Washington State Penitentiary. And here's where the tragedy turns almost ghost-like. He died in prison at just 30 years old.
Sun lights up the daytime. Moon lights.
The official cause remains disputed. Some say pneumonia, others whisper darker possibilities. The paperwork was thin. The respect was thinner. But the legacy? Colossal. James Brown idolized him, recorded a full album dedicated to him, and called him one of the greatest singers who ever lived. Every time a soul singer pushes emotion to the point of danger, Little Willie John lives again. If Willie's story was flame, our next tale is pure heartbreak, a dream cut down by violence in the streets. Number 11, Daryl Banks.
Walk right on in.
Daryl Banks was a Detroit soul singer who should have been a household name. Smooth, powerful, and precise, with a voice that could slide from yearning to joyful in a single breath. In 1966, he scored his breakout hit with Open the Door to Your Heart.
Let your love come running in.
a record that felt like pure sunlight breaking through clouds. It was the kind of track that made you believe love could heal anything. DJs loved it, dance halls loved it. Daryl Banks looked like he was on his way. But behind that success came a bitter industry conflict. A dispute over songwriting credits, specifically with songwriter Donny Elbert, tangled Banks in lawsuits and publishing struggles.
Let it shine like the light.
In the music world of the 1960s, where artists already made very little, losing credits meant losing income, losing momentum, losing stability. The fight stalled what should have been his rise. Banks kept performing, kept trying to push forward, but life had more tragedy waiting. In 1970, at age 32, Daryl Banks was shot and killed in Detroit by an off-duty police officer.
That's what keeps my love so strong.
The circumstances remain murky. Some say it was self-defense, others say it was excessive force. What's certain is that one of the purest voices of the era was silenced in an instant. Today, his records are prized among Northern soul collectors, DJs, and music lovers who know how to listen past the charts and straighten into history's overlooked corners.
Let your love come right to me.
His voice had the kind of hope we don't get to hear often anymore. Wide open, sincere, unguarded. If Daryl Banks' tragedy was sudden and shocking, the next artist's story is one of slow, heartbreaking unraveling, caught between genius, addiction, and the weight of the world. Number 10. Baby Huey. Baby Huey was larger than life in every possible way. Born James Ramey in Indiana, he fronted Baby Huey and the Babysitters, a Chicago-based band that blended raw soul, psychedelic funk, and the heavy urgency of the late 1960s.
Oh, yes it will.
Standing over 350 pounds with a booming voice and a stage presence that felt almost spiritual, he didn't just sing, he commanded the room. When Baby Huey hit a scream, you could feel the walls shake. But the era wasn't kind to young black musicians shouldering pressure, touring constantly, and living fast.
A long time coming, but I know.
Baby Huey fell deeply into heroin addiction, just as his career was poised to explode. Curtis Mayfield himself believed Huey was going to be the next major voice of soul, and began producing his debut album on Curtis Records. Imagine that, Curtis Mayfield personally shaping your sound. The industry was ready. The music was powerful. The door to stardom was fully open. But the struggle was bigger than the moment. On October 28, 1970, just 26 years old, Baby Huey died from a drug-related heart attack in Chicago. He never lived to see his album released. And here's the haunting part. That album would influence entire generations. His voice and sound echo through Pete Rock and CL Smooth, A Tribe Called Quest, Public Enemy, the Wu-Tang Clan. They sampled him like scripture. Baby Huey never got to witness the legacy he helped build.
I wondered if that change was gonna come, girl.
His tragedy isn't just in how he died, but in how close he was to changing the direction of soul forever. If Baby Huey was a star on the edge of breakthrough, the next artist was a young woman whose voice soared, but whose life was stolen by the pressures of the industry. Number 9. Bettye Swann. Bettye Swann had a voice that felt like soft sunlight on a tired heart, gentle, tender, and deeply human. Born Betty Jean Champion in Louisiana, she grew up surrounded by church music and the rich storytelling of Southern blues. When she emerged on the R&B scene in the mid-1960s, her breakout hit Make Me Yours reached #1 on the R&B charts in 1967. It sounded like a love letter whispered in confidence, steady, patient, full of quiet longing. But Bettye was painfully shy, almost fragile in temperament. The spotlight wasn't a dream for her, it was overwhelming.
I got over you just long enough to.
The pressures of constant performance, touring, managing band conflicts, and dealing with exploitative managers wore her down. After her husband and manager, who was also her anchor, died suddenly in the early 1970s, Swann's world collapsed. Grief closed in, and the industry had no support for emotional healing. So instead of burning out publicly, she walked away from music completely. No farewell tour, no big goodbye.
Oh, but why take it out?
She simply disappeared. She changed her name, converted to a deep life of faith, and lived quietly in Nevada, rarely acknowledging her past. Many soul historians spent decades trying to find her, unsure if she was even still alive. Her voice is still sampled, adored, and rediscovered by new generations. But Bettye Swann chose silence over fame. Her tragedy isn't death or scandal. It's the weight of a heart that loved too deeply to survive the industry. If that was quiet heartbreak, our next story is fiery, fierce, and filled with fight, right up until the very end. Number 8. Garnet Mimms. Garnet Mimms had one of the purest pleading voices in all of soul music. Born in West Virginia and raised in Philadelphia, he trained in gospel quartets before stepping into secular music. When Garnet sang, it sounded like someone praying through heartbreak.
But now I know.
His breakout hit, Cry Baby, in 1963, later famously covered by Janis Joplin, was soul laid bare. The kind of record that didn't just play in a room, it hovered there, trembling like a heart about to break open. But Garnet's story is a quiet tragedy, rooted in how the industry treats its pioneers. While his voice was being borrowed, copied, and reimagined by rock singers in the British invasion, Garnet himself was pushed into the background.
I need you, and I promise that
He wasn't glamorous enough for pop packaging, not young enough for teen marketing, not smiling enough for Motown-style polish. The world loved the sound he created, just not him. His record label mishandled promotions. Singles that could have been hits were buried. And when his influence started showing up in white rock acts who skyrocketed past him, the industry offered no recognition, no compensation, no spotlight.
I need you, I need you, I need.
The hardest part? Garnet never grew bitter, but he did grow tired. By the mid-1970s, Garnet left mainstream music to work as a minister and quietly serve his community. People in church pews heard one of the greatest soul voices ever to live, and most never even realized it. To this day, music historians call him the missing link between gospel and deep soul. His tragedy isn't scandal or downfall. His tragedy is being forgotten while the world built empires on his sound. But trust me, if a life overshadowed hurts, the next story comes from a voice that burned too bright, too fast, leaving echoes that still feel unfinished. Number 7, Ruby Johnson.
Or just before day.
Ruby Johnson had a voice that could stop a crowded room mid-sentence. Born in Arkansas and raised in Memphis, she didn't sing with glitter or flash. She sang with truth. When she moved to Washington, D.C. in the early 1960s, she found her way to producer Jerry Ragavoy, the same man who would later shape Howard Tate's sound. Together, they carved out a brand of deep soul that felt almost cinematic, slow, smoldering, and loaded with emotion.
Or listening to the radio.
Her most haunting performance, Weak Spot, 1966, didn't climb the national charts like it deserved. But among soul aficionados, that record is a masterpiece. The sound of a woman standing at the edge of heartbreak, refusing to fall. Ruby's voice cracked, trembled, and pushed forward with strength that made you feel her life inside it. But Ruby was caught in a perfect storm of industry challenges. Her label, Stax, was undergoing internal shifts and money troubles, and newer acts with more commercial polish were getting the attention. Ruby wasn't marketed, she wasn't promoted. And in the music business, talent alone is never enough. Visibility is currency. So Ruby worked, waited, hoped, and the recognition never came. Feeling overlooked and exhausted, she stepped away from the industry entirely. She went back to Washington, D.C., where she spent her later years working in social services, caring for children and families in need.
Then you can be found. I won't have to.
Imagine that. One of the most emotionally powerful voices of the era spent her final decades helping others quietly, while her records became hidden gems known only to collectors. Ruby Johnson didn't burn out, she faded out, which is sometimes the saddest ending of all. Her voice remains a whisper in soul music history, breathtaking, unresolved, unforgettable. If Ruby's story was one of fading light, the next artist faced a much sharper fall: fame, pressure, heartbreak, and a tragic early end. Number 6, Barbara Lynn.
Oh yeah, you lose a good thing.
Barbara Lynn was a quiet revolutionary, a left-handed black woman writing her own songs, leading her own band, and playing lead guitar in the early 1960s, when nearly every label executive believed women were only meant to sing, not create. Born in Beaumont, Texas, Barbara blended blues, soul, and Gulf Coast warmth into a style that felt tender and intimate.
Yeah, you lose a good thing.
Her 1962 hit, You'll Lose a Good Thing, wasn't just a chart success. It was a declaration. Women have stories to tell too, and we'll tell them our own way. She toured with the Giants, Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, Gladys Knight. She was poised to become a defining voice of 60s R&B. But the industry didn't know how to support women outside the mold.
I love you, mama. Oh, I said I feel all right.
When Barbara became a mother, the label expected her to choose career or family. And for Barbara, love won. She stepped back from touring, from charts, from the spotlight that was finally beginning to recognize her. Her tragedy wasn't scandal, addiction, or downfall. It was being forced to choose between her gift and her life. The world moved on without realizing what had been lost.
Oh yeah, if you should lose.
To those who know deep soul, Barbara Lynn is a quiet hero. To the mainstream, she became a name whispered instead of celebrated. If Barbara's story feels bittersweet, hold on, because the tragedies ahead only grow heavier. If these stories are moving you, if you're feeling the beauty and the heartbreak, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It helps more soul lovers find these artists, and it keeps their memory alive. And stay with me. The final 5 stories are some of the most powerful of all. Number 5, Wendy Rene. Wendy. Rene had a voice that felt like daydreams floating through summer window screens. Born Mary Frierson in Memphis, she was only a teenager when she began recording with Stax Records. Her sound was gentle, hazy, almost childlike. But underneath was something soulful and wise. In 1964, she released After Laughter Comes Tears, a song that felt like a whispered prophecy. It spoke of heartbreak not as drama, but as something slow, lingering, and deeply human. Wendy was on the rise. She was set to tour and perform alongside some of Stax's most iconic acts, including Otis Redding. And here is where fate strikes with heartbreaking precision. In December 1967, Wendy Rene was scheduled to fly with Otis Redding and members of the Bar-Kays to a performance in Wisconsin. At the last moment, she decided not to go, choosing instead to stay home with her newborn baby. The plane crashed. Otis Redding and most of the Bar-Kays died. Wendy was spared, but the grief of surviving became its own kind of tragedy. After the crash, Wendy left music almost entirely. The joy was gone. The studio didn't feel safe. She disappeared from the industry and lived a quiet life in Memphis, rarely speaking about those years. She wasn't forgotten because she faded. She was forgotten because she lived with too much memory. Decades later, hip-hop would resurrect her voice. Wu-Tang Clan sampled After Laughter Comes Tears, breathing new life into Wendy's ghost-like legacy. Young listeners thought the vocals were haunting because they were. Wendy Rene survived tragedy, but she paid for it in silence. If that story left you still, the next artist faced a tragedy that unfolded in front of the entire world. Number 4, Tammi Terrell.
Call my name, I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry.
Tammi Terrell had a smile that could lift a room and a voice that could soften the hardest heart. Born Thomasina Montgomery in Philadelphia, she signed her first contract at just 15 years old. She had fire, humor, tenderness, the whole spark. And when Motown paired her with Marvin Gaye, something magical happened. Their duets, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, didn't just sound romantic. They felt like two souls breathing in sync. But behind the chemistry and the bright lights, Tammi was carrying pain. Before Motown, she had endured traumatic and abusive relationships. Experiences that left emotional scars the world never saw. And then, at the height of her rising success, the headaches began. During a concert in 1907, right on stage in Marvin's Arms, Tammi collapsed. Doctors diagnosed her with a brain tumor. She was only 22 years old. What followed were 8 surgeries, endless treatments, and a music industry that didn't know how to slow down or care.
Ain't nothing like the real thing, baby.
Marvin Gaye was devastated. He visited her constantly. Their final recording sessions were done with Tammi too ill to sing. Motown quietly used a vocal stand-in, insisting Marvin record anyway. Even success rushed on without her. Tammi Terrell passed away in 1970 at just 24. Marvin Gaye was never the same. His next masterpiece, What's Going On, was born from grief. Tammy's death changed his voice, his spirit, his reason for singing. Tammy's tragedy is not only that she died young, but that the world only got a glimpse of what she could have become. And speaking of voices gone too soon, our next story is one of unreal talent swallowed by the very industry that made him. Number 3, Donny Hathaway.
Love me tonight.
Donny Hathaway was the kind of artist who didn't just sing, he felt. Every note, every harmony, every chord seemed to carry a lifetime of memory and longing. Born in Chicago and raised in St. Louis, he studied music formally, deeply, became a composer, arranger, and pianist with a scholar's mind and a poet's heart. When he entered the soul scene in the late 1960s, his sound didn't chase trends, it expanded them. Songs like A Song for You and The Ghetto felt like prayers wrapped in melody. But Donny carried a heavy internal world. In the early 1970s, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. At a time when mental illness was barely understood and rarely treated with compassion, Hathaway found himself suspended between brilliance and torment. Voices, isolation, fear.
And you were gonna say goodbye, but if you...
The studio became both sanctuary and battlefield. Yet, even through the struggle, he formed one of the most emotionally moving musical partnerships in soul history. Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack. Their duets, Where Is the Love and The Closer I Get to You, were like two hearts speaking in perfect harmony. Audiences felt it. Roberta felt it. Donny felt it. But the illness did not let go. By the late 1970s, episodes became more frightening.
A little bit more. Each and every...
He withdrew. He returned. He tried. He fought. And the world didn't know how to help. On January 13th, 1999, Donny Hathaway died after falling from the 15th floor window of the Essex House Hotel in New York. The coroner ruled it a suicide. He was 33. And here's the truth that hurts and heals at the same time. Every time an artist sings from the deepest cracks of the heart, Sampha, Daniel Caesar, John Legend, D'Angelo, Donny Hathaway is there. Still teaching, still echoing, still feeling. His tragedy is that his brilliance was too large for the world to hold. But his gift never left us. If Donny's story was internal struggle, the next one is raw injustice, a life stolen not by illness, but by violence. Number 2, O.V. Wright, O.V.
Oh, baby, don't make me...
Wright had a voice that sounded like Sunday morning sorrow wrapped in Saturday night sin. Born Overton Vertus Wright in Lenoir County, Mississippi, he came up in the gospel quartets. Voices stacked tight, harmonies rich, discipline deep.
Oh, baby, please.
When he crossed into secular soul in the mid-1960s, you could still hear church in every breath, a man trying to hold on to salvation while the world tugged at his sleeve. His early records like That's How Strong My Love Is, later covered by Otis Redding and the Rolling Stones, were heart-wrenching sermons of devotion. But it was when he landed at High Records under producer Willie Mitchell, alongside the same Memphis studio family that would later lift Al Green, that his music reached its purest form.
Ooh, baby, please don't.
Deep soul, sweaty, smoky, late-night soul, the kind you feel behind your ribs. But behind the microphone, O.V. struggled with heroin addiction, a battle that shadowed nearly every phase of his career. The pain, the need, the chasing, it cost him recording opportunities, tours, stability, and eventually, his freedom.
You gonna make...
He spent time incarcerated during the very years that could have made him a star. When he emerged, his voice was still there, older, cracked, aching, but even more beautiful in its bruising. He released some of his most emotionally devastating music during this period, songs that sounded like they were carved straight out of regret. But addiction is a long war, and the world did not know how to save him. O.V. Wright died in 1980, just 41 years old, his body worn down, his legacy unfinished. Today, deep soul collectors speak his name in reverent tones.
I'm begging you, baby, please, baby, don't.
Modern singers study him in secret. His voice, still a storm on tape, a reminder that some of the greatest souls gave everything and never got back what they deserved. Number 1. Arthur Alexander.
You say he loves you more than me. Well, I will set you free.
Arthur Alexander is one of the most influential R&B songwriters in American history. Yet, he is also one of the least recognized. Born in Florence, Alabama, Arthur was the quiet architect of a sound that shaped Motown, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones. He recorded at famed studios before Muscle Shoals became a legend, blending country storytelling with deep Southern soul.
Like I love you. Oh.
His songs were gentle, aching, honest, never flashy, never forced. His 1961 single, You Better Move On, was the blueprint for emotional restraint in soul music. The Rolling Stones covered it. The Beatles covered Anna, Go to Him. Bob Dylan studied his phrasing. Even Elvis Presley recorded his work. Think about that. 3 of the biggest acts in music history built parts of their sound on Arthur's songs. Yet Arthur never saw the success his imitators did.
Give back my ring to me, and darling, you'll be free to go with.
Why? Because the business side of music was ruthless. Royalty battles, label disputes, management conflicts, bad contracts, no safety net. While the artists who covered his work climbed to superstardom, Arthur was left behind, struggling financially, emotionally, and spiritually. The music industry moved on without him, while he watched others get rich from the songs he wrote straight from his heart. By the 1970s, the spotlight was gone. By the 1980s, Arthur was driving a bus in Cleveland to support his family.
Every girl I've ever had breaks my heart and leaves.
Imagine stepping onto a city bus and being greeted by a man whose songs shaped the very music playing from the radio. But here comes the part that breaks you and lifts you. In the early 1990s, there was a comeback, a new record deal, a new album. Critics celebrating him at last. After decades of being overlooked, the world finally began to remember. And then, just months into his return, Arthur Alexander suffered a heart attack and passed away in 1993 at only 53 years old.
Just one more thing, girl. You give.
He died just as the applause was beginning. Arthur Alexander is the truest symbol of this entire list. A brilliant soul who shaped music history, yet lived a life far quieter than the legacy he left behind. These artists didn't just make music, they poured their lives into the microphone. Their stories remind us how many voices built soul music from the ground up, only to be pushed to the background, forgotten, or lost too soon. But we remember, and by remembering, we honor theirs. If this journey touched your heart, subscribe to keep the soul alive. We do this every week, so these voices never fade again. And right now, don't stop here. Tap the video on your screen to continue this soul stroll. Up next, 15 most hated R&B bands of the 1960s. Click it, and let's keep the music playing.